Welcome to morning meditation. Great to have you with us this day. The Lord has painted our trees again a little bit in white, so quite wonderful down here on the river. We begin ordinary time, but of course we know that ordinary time is extraordinary time. We get some great scripture, some wonderful things, and so we're gonna do a little bit of background into where we start and why we start there with our readings. We have a great joy today. This is part of what makes it extraordinary time, is that Stacy is with us today. And so Stacy, let us begin in song. Thank you. So we've got a couple of things in our liturgical life today. One is Saint Margarite Bourgeois, and I talked about her last week. She's born in 1620, and so the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth Rock on 1619, if my sixth grade history still sticks in my brain. So, I mean, early on in the days of the settlement of the New World in North America. In the South, the settlements had begun more fully by then, but in Canada and the United States, she's born early. At 20 years old, she wants to become a nun, and she gets rejected. And, of course, rejection can be the end of us, but she continued to ask God, what is it you would want of me? And one of the people from Canada came to her hometown and said, we need people. It was the governor of the French settlement in Canada. We need people. And so she wanted to start a school in the city that eventually will become Montreal. And when she arrived, the colony numbered 200 people with a hospital and a Jesuit mission chapel. She returned home, grabbed a bunch of people to come work with her, and they started a school for Native American children. And she continued to go back to Canada. And I told this story about her last week. There was one time she was going from Canada to France, and they see an English ship on the horizon, and they were like, "Mother, what will happen if we're taken captive by the English and taken to England?" And she said something like, "I'm sure we will find God in England as we do in France or in Canada." And so that unshakable faith. She was one of those saints with just amazing energy. This was one of the marks, of course, of Mother Teresa, that could just continue to go and to serve. At age 69, she walked from Montreal to Quebec and to start a community of sisters in Quebec. By the time she died, she was referred to as the mother of the colony. She was canonized in 1982, of course, by the great canonizer, John Paul II. And it's still very beautiful to visit Montreal in that area, just the churches and the faith that is living there. Of course, colonization is a difficult thing, but great love that Saint Margarite tried to outpour. Saint Margarite. So that is the end of our North American saints for January. We'll go back to Europe and other places from here on out, but we had quite a run there of North American connections. So that is that. Second thing, yesterday we began ordinary time. And so I'm going to take you back just a little bit to yesterday. And that is, this isn't confusing at all. Sunday cycle of the lectionary is a 3-year cycle. And we read, on our 30-some weeks of ordinary time, we read pretty continuously the stories from the gospel from start to finish while throwing out the specials. So Christmas and Easter and, those things we get on special days, we don't read during the dailies. And I've talked about how this, we don't get during the Sundays. And I've talked about how this, the Last Supper, beautiful reading, but it's really only read in the context of the long Passion accounts. And so the preaching on the Last Supper, we don't get tons of time to do that because it's given to us on Good Friday. Not so much on Good Friday, actually. It's given to us on Palm Sunday, where we get the long Passion from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Good Friday's all Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is always on Good Friday. That's maybe more details than you need. But and so we don't get these specials during the year, nor during the daily Mass cycle either. They get thrown out on the Sunday Mass cycle, or they get rearranged during their actual days, and the same thing for the daily Mass cycle. So we read the rest of the Gospels, starting with Mark. Now, this isn't confusing because Matthew's year A and the other one, Matthew, Mark, Luke. But during the daily Mass cycle, we read Mark, Matthew, Luke. And so in October, November, we're always reading Luke. Over the summer, we're always reading Matthew. And now we read Mark. And so I couldn't find any reason for why they did it that way. Then it's attended with semi-continuous first readings. And so I don't know if we're in year 1 or 2. Gospels are the same in year 1 or 2, basically. There might be a couple of minor differences, but basically Mark, Matthew, Luke in sequential order, minus the big celebrations. First reading, though, this year so the year that we have, I don't know if it's 1 or 2. Do you know? Hebrews. I couldn't find it easily. Hebrews, we start last year. We started in Samuel. And And so great stuff as we went through Samuel last year with Hannah and her friends. All right, so she doesn't have many. She wasn't. Yeah, she loved the Lord and needed no more. And so a word about the Hebrews. And so actually this is a fairly long book. And I asked this morning if anyone remembered when we used to call it Paul's letter to the Hebrews. Now, no one raised their hands, so maybe this was made up in my mind. But I was pretty sure that in my youth, we called this Paul's letter to the Hebrew. Then at Vatican II, it would have been, and in the subsequent readings, probably in the mid-70s, it would have been just called the letter to the Hebrews. Paul's authorship is uncertain at best, but it is an amazing book. Written definitely before 100, so it is definitely written in the apostolic age. The apostolic age is considered to go until the death of the last apostle, which is considered John, which is considered around 100 AD, the apostolic age. Now, Hebrews is written in a time where they've been Christian for a while, and they are wondering why. Why do I do this? I mean, this isn't super popular in the culture. This isn't popular at all with religious authorities with civil authorities. They don't care for us Christians. Why am I doing this? And the author to the letter to the Hebrews says a number of things, but one of the things he says is, you think you got it tough? Look at Christ's life. And so we get this a lot. I mean, this is a common motif, but I believe this is kind of the only place this is used in Scripture, that you want to see tough? Look at Christ. Though higher than the angels, he's made lower. He's humbled for us. He becomes obedient through his suffering. Beautiful stuff from the author to the Hebrews. But I do want to read this opening line from yesterday as we get Hebrews. The other thing about this, we're going to get this for the next couple of weeks in our daily Mass lectionary. So it's nice to have a little bit of overview as we will dive pretty heavily into the book. Brothers and sisters, in times past God spoke in partial and various ways to our ancestors through the prophets. In these days, he spoke to us through the Son, whom God made heir of all things, and through whom God created the universe, who is the refulgence of his glory, the very imprint of his being, who sustains all things by his mighty word. And when he had accomplished purification from sins, he took a seat at the right hand of the Majesty on high, as far superior to the angels, as the name he has inherited is more excellent than any other. In the first couple chapters anyway, and I think this continues throughout Hebrews, much of this is in italics. He is grabbing whole cloth, he or she, author of the letter to the Hebrews, is grabbing whole cloth from the Old Testament. And I want to give one of my favorite Catholic lines in the Bible from today's reading. It was not to angels that God subjected the world to come. It was not to angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. Instead, someone has testified somewhere. This is the way Catholics talk about the Bible. Oh, it's in there somewhere. What is man that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man that you care for him? Of course, this is from the Psalms. It's in italics. It is one of the beauties of reading it biblically, is that you see all the quotes, and it's not perfectly obvious, except when the author says, instead someone has testified somewhere, someone has written somewhere, right? That's a great line. But I want to find this other line here. For it was fitting that he, for whom and through whom all things exist, in bringing many children to glory, should make the leader to their salvation perfect through suffering. This is his line about Jesus. And so beautiful. Therefore, Jesus is not afraid to call us brothers and sisters. And so we will unpack this letter to the Hebrews throughout our days. The other thing that we have that just becomes beautiful or amazing in Mark's gospel, we begin to see it today. Yesterday we continued with the calling of the apostles. Mark's gospel, it's like a lion, John the Baptist roars like a voice crying out in the desert, but also it's compact, it's strong, it's powerful. It just pounds at you. It has the longest passion narrative of all of them, but by far the shortest narrative getting up to the passion. So they have sometimes said that Mark's gospel is the passion narrative with a short introduction. And so Mark's gospel, but he moves it right along. And so he's already calling disciples yesterday. And it's wonderful to watch in Mark's gospel that the disciples don't get it. And the other piece of this that's tied to the disciples not getting it is this thing that is called the Messianic secret. The Messianic secret. And so this starts today. And I'm just going to point it out, and we will get it more than once, twice, or three times, especially in Mark's gospel. And so I know who you are, the Holy One of God, right? Jesus is testified throughout by the demons, but hardly ever recognized in faith by a human being until the resurrection. And so the resurrection becomes the great turning point. But Mark's gospel is beautiful and super interesting. And so Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." This begins, although not in the fullness of the Messianic secret way, but it begins it. Quiet, come out of him. Jesus will continue to tell those who want to proclaim him as the Messiah, no, keep it quiet, keep it quiet. Interesting stuff, but it seems that you will not get this right until I have suffered and died. Before that, you're proclaiming me King, Lord, Holy One. Your interpretation will be wrong. I will not be whom you want me to be if that's the way you think of me. And so this theme, this revelation, we need to wait sort of with bated breath to see who this Jesus is, even though we will get many clues through Mark's narrative along the way. But then the discovery of the resurrection. Important for us to try to not get it wrong either, that whom do we expect this Messiah to be? The one who takes away all our suffering, or the one who enters into it with us? Thanks for joining us today. It's exciting to begin ordinary time with great readings from Mark and the letter to the Hebrews. And the Hebrews will emphasize one point of Jesus that is not emphasized anywhere else, and that is his priesthood and his being the offering. Priest and offering. All right. Peace be with you. Great to have you. Morning meditations, Tuesday through Friday at 9 a.m. Blessings. Stacy, take us away in song, please.
This is